From the European Parliament here in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight, and this is what we have in store for you. EU leaders break bread tonight. On the menu, Brexit and Northern Ireland. With a heavy side of migration, we have coverage from Salzburg as well as analysis. Plus, failing upwards. Germany's top spy gets sacked and then he gets promoted. Fort Trump, Poland makes an offer the U.S. president may not be able to refuse. And talk about Foreign Secretary goals. Jeremy Hunt gets top marks in Japan. Thank you for joining us. Now it's time to meet our panel. Catherine Fiore is a journalist at the EU Reporter. Catherine, which of these stories do you like?
Oh, gosh, it's quite a lot of choice there, but Brexit is always on my mind, so that's
something everyone's looking at today, indeed. And of course, we have Esther Zalan. She's a reporter from the EU Observer. Esther, what do you like today?
I like the migration topic on the summit. I think it's very interesting how member states are still divided over how to solve the issue, so that will be interesting to see.
All right, and we have Brian McGuire, a video journalist with Euractiv here in Brussels. Brian, which one do you like?
Fort Trump today. Can't get enough of Trump.
All right, we'll be talking a lot about Trump today. But first of all, let's go to our top story. EU leaders are dining in Salzburg tonight, the beginning of a two-day summit. And front and center this evening will be Theresa May and her 10-minute pitch. Well, the British Prime Minister she's trying to sell her Chequers Brexit plan. But the issue of Northern Ireland continues to be contentious. Now, Chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier held a news conference last night, and this is what he had to say.
We are ready to improve this proposal. Work on the EU side is ongoing. We are clarifying which goods arriving in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK would need to be checked and where, when, and by whom these checks could be performed. We need to de-dramatize the checks that are needed.
But writing in the German newspaper Die Welt this morning, Theresa May sounded less conciliatory regarding the Northern Ireland issue, because she said to come to a successful conclusion, just as the UK has evolved its position, the EU will need to do the same. Neither side can demand the unacceptable of the other, such as an external customs border between different parts of the United Kingdom. Well, our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he is in Salzburg covering this summit, and he's joining us now live. Darren, we heard from Donald Tusk this afternoon. What did he have to say?
Well, this is the first of three pretty crucial summits when it comes to these Brexit negotiations. We have got one next month and the final one, Tesa, in November. That's just been announced by Donald Tusk, that it is confirmed there will be essentially that Brexit summit in November. But we start off here in rather sunny Salzburg, where it's quite warm. And as Donald Tusk pointed out today, time is ticking on these negotiations. Now, he made it clear that there is hope of a Brexit deal, but he did bring up this issue of the Irish border, which has been the vexed issue of these negotiations over the last year or so. He said that Theresa May's proposal in the Chequers deal needed evolution, it needed reworked. They are not terribly happy with it. Now, why aren't they happy? They believe that with the current arrangement that the UK leads the customs zone, that ultimately that will result in a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, as we heard from Michel Barnier there, Tesa, he said last night that there is room for improvement when it comes to the EU's position. Now, in reality, what does that mean? Well, it means using technology, that essentially that could be used to get around the difficulties of different customs arrangements. But for Theresa May, that still creates this so-called border in the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, not least of all because some physical goods will have to be checked. And tonight, at that dinner, Theresa May is going to stand up and say, I'm sorry, that is unacceptable to us. It undermines the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom. And clearly, her partners supporting her in government, the Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland, they're not terribly happy with this as well. So, in reality, even though the mood music has changed here, even though Brussels seems to be willing to compromise, actually the red lines have not shifted at all. And that is why the impasse still remains. So where do we go to next? Well, as I say, Theresa May makes her pitch at the dinner tonight. Then tomorrow, the 27th, when Theresa May leaves, hear from Michel Barnier. But be in no doubt, even though there's talk of a deal, even though there is now talk of optimism that a deal will happen, Tesa, we are still a long way off trying to nail down that crucial issue of the Irish border. And if it's not nailed down, well, then there is always that possibility of no deal and the chaos that may well lead for the UK and for the European Union too.
All right, thank you for that. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. I'd like to bring this to the panel. Catherine, I'll start with you. What is your reading about this summit? Is there any progress that we can expect from all those sticking points, Irish border?
Michel Barnier is trying really hard to de-dramatise this issue. There are existing checks at the border as we speak. And what he's saying is, this is really just a continuation of what you have. Don't make it a political issue. We're not questioning the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom. So he's making that case very strongly. And I very much hope that Theresa May will come round to seeing it as such. She's in a difficult position, of course, because she is dependent on the votes of the Democratic Unionist Party in Westminster, with whom she has a supply and confidence agreement.
Yeah, I'd go to you, Brian. I mean, this is sounding like a he said, she said, but, you know, who is going to budge first?
Well, first of all, this is a back-to-school meeting that they're having. This is catch-up after summer. The big game is really going to be played towards November, and I wouldn't expect too much to come out of this right now. But there's also a hostage situation. Theresa May has been held hostage by the DUP, as Catherine said, by the Brexiteers and by Boris Johnson and Michael Gove within her party as well. She can't move an inch without having to move somewhere else to compensate and upset somebody else on the other side. Barnier knows that. Barnier knows that this is really a fictitious circumstance. Ireland as an island is essentially a quarantine zone anyway because of how our goods, particularly the animal goods, function there. So a lot of this is made up and it's dramatic and will push to the final deal. But at the moment, this is...
So they're just saying what they're saying to please whoever they have to please.
I think Barnier's putting pressure on May to compel a more dramatic circumstance later, and everybody will give something in the end. But what Theresa May can actually deliver, and Michael Gove already said, even after Brexit happens, we'll change everything if we want to. Barnier said that's not going to happen. Nobody trusts the British to actually deliver on whatever is decided here.
And Esther, I mean, covering it from this side, when Barnier's statements are interpreted, it almost seems like we get too excited. Oh, he said something optimistic. Is it really? I mean, is he saying something? Is he really moving towards a compromise?
Well, he did say that the EU is ready to upgrade their proposal on this particular backstop that would create, in the UK's view, a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But I think, yes, he put an extra pressure on May by saying that there needs to be an agreement by October. But what also prevents Prime Minister May to move is the Congress, the Conservative Party's Congress in early October, which everyone here in the EU and Brussels also waits to see what happens. And if Prime Minister May will get the leverage she needs to compromise with the EU.
Right. And, you know, okay, we've been discussing that there's really a lot at stake, the Irish border being a very big sticking point. But let's take a closer look at some of the numbers. So trade from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland is worth 3.8 billion euros a year. Now, from Northern Ireland to the rest of the UK, trade is worth 15.7 billion euros. And there have been all sorts of proposals, you know, on how to regulate the trade post-Brexit, some relying on technology, but not everyone is sold on the idea. Alex Morgan and theCUBE in Lyon have been digging into that part of the story. Alex, what do you have for us?
Well, Tessa, we're hearing there just how complicated this is. But for some people elsewhere in Europe, it's fair to say they're used to borders. They're used to land borders. And perhaps some people might be confused as to why this issue is so vexing. Let's just visualise it. Come with me for a sec. I'll show you on the maps why this is so complicated. First of all, it comes down to the division on the island of Ireland itself. You have here the Republic of Ireland and then Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. Now, this border is not an issue at the moment because both are part of the European Union. When the UK leaves, that means Northern Ireland leaves. And then we have the reintroduction of a 310-mile-long land border between the European Union and the UK. Now, part of that Good Friday Agreement, which ended decades of violence on both the mainland of the UK and here in Ireland was that there will be no physical border, no infrastructure, no police checkpoints here. Now, the suggestion has always been, well, to make sure there is no hard border here, there needs to be some sort of alignment between Northern Ireland and the Republic to effectively stay alongside the EU. That's been rejected, of course. The other suggestion, the backstop from the EU, is somehow to have checks in the Irish Sea. Now, Theresa May and the UK stance is no, that effectively puts a border here between the UK on this side and Northern Ireland on this side. So you can see it's basically a bucket of spaghetti or a bucket of knots. It's really difficult to know how you could untie them. But one of the suggestions that seems to have resurfaced now is talk of tech. So let's just show you some of the speculation, because at this stage, these are just suggestions. This problem that I've just shown you there really is unique to the United Kingdom and its border with the Republic of Ireland. But let's just show you what some people are thinking. Well, first of all, they say, well, maybe X-ray scanners could be used. So you don't have to physically search vehicles or ships. You might be able to scan to see what's inside, therefore avoiding physical personnel having to go through goods and check them. The other suggestion, you could use automatic number plate recognition to make sure that vehicles can be checked and tracked without necessarily having to go through tolls or to be stopped. And there's the last one. This, a controversial suggestion by some, especially tech journalists, saying this might be a violation of privacy. But what about drones? Some people saying drones could be used to monitor that border. We've already heard every day thousands of people move back and forward across that border. I mean, people live on that border, and hitherto the agreements that have been reached mean it's not an issue. So what about tech? Could tech finally break this stalemate? Not everyone's convinced, needless to say. Let's just bring you up some of what people have been saying. Well, first of all, Alex Dean here, who is very much on the Brexit side, effectively saying that now the EU's coming round to a suggestion the UK's had all along. Effectively, he's saying, yes, tech could do it. But other people saying Barnier's words are not talking about the land border. They're talking about a sea border. And so it's not actually solving the most vexing issue. That's what Jonathan Liss is saying here, that actually this is really still, it's not saved checkers in his view, and it still leaves this big question about the physical border, the land border in place. So at the moment, these are just suggestions. We're yet to see actual detail. But as I say, it's like a bucket of spaghetti, and it's yet to see who can straighten the pieces out.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. All right, Catherine, do you think these ideas are actually can happen, can help?
Yes, potentially, and there are already reforms going through. But the Northern Irish Select Committee in Westminster looked at these famous technological solutions, and they said they're not there yet. They're not going to be adequate. Maybe one day they will, but by Brexit date, they will not be ready. And just a question about the question of regulatory alignment. There will have to be regulatory alignment between North and South if there's to be no hard border. The joint report that was agreed to by both sides in December and reinforced in March makes it clear that the UK is committed to not having a hard border, and that they will, it could be up for Stormont, the Northern Irish Assembly, to decide on whether they agree to
Which isn't even sitting at the moment.
Which isn't even sitting.
No, but
to add to the complexity.
I think what people would like to ask is, would this be a massive headache, really, if you consider the amount of trade perhaps going through those? Will it actually be a massive
There are
headache?
350 border crossings on this 310-mile border. It's almost impossible to police that, never mind have a customs regulatory zone enforced across that. But there are some issues here which are being fudged as well. It's you're looking at a system which gives. We're being told something which seems as though every single thing across the border is going to be checked. That's not the case. Currently, about 10% of some goods are being checked. Barnier is proposing 40-45% of other goods to be checked. So this is not a massive operation, but the political sensitivity is what matters here.
Is the Irish border the biggest issue, or are we focusing a lot of attention here, and there's still a whole lot? Is it a negotiating strategy?
Well, there are other issues, of course, and I think another massive issue will be governance. I mean, how will this work in future? How will the relationship work? And of course, what will the future relationship be, and what will be the content of the political agreement? That will also be presented.
The big game is to play towards a united Ireland for many politicians now. The recent polls show that in the event of a hard Brexit, something like 59% of people in Northern Ireland actually want to see a united Ireland. That falls down to about 51% in the event of a negotiated Brexit. But the DUP, or the hardline unionists in Northern Ireland, already see what's coming in the future. They've lost their democratic majority in Northern Ireland. They will be under increased pressure to move towards a vote on a united Ireland. I spoke with some Northern Irish politicians today. They said within 5 to 10 years they expect the first vote to take place. So what we're talking about today is something of a holding pattern. Yes, we get an agreement, but by the time this actually comes into play in 2, 5, 10 years' time, we're looking at a united Ireland, and none of this may actually matter then.
Do you agree with that we're looking at a united Ireland going down?
That could be possibly one of the goals of many politicians here. But over a year ago, when the negotiations have started, the Irish border issue, solving the Irish border issue, was one of the 3 main points of the EU. So I think that the fact that it's still unresolved and we don't really see where it's going to land, it's going to make these talks very difficult.
I think it's because this was said at the very beginning. I have some suspicion that some politicians have deliberately used this subject to put a wedge into the middle of the Conservative Party. This is a nearly impossible puzzle to solve.
I'd like to ask very quickly your level of optimism on where these talks are going. Are you optimistic? Zero.
Oh, gosh. 50-50, I'd say.
And you, Catherine?
Well, I'm very optimistic.
You are very optimistic.
Well, I think the
well
EU
represented here.
have taken a really solid position from day one. They've been prepared. They've thought it all through in great detail. And there's been an amazing amount of solidarity, particularly around the Irish border. And I have to say, I've personally been extremely impressed by their cohesion on this particular issue anyhow.
All right. Now, we are talking about negotiations. You have the US President Donald Trump. He was asked about the European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. Let's take a look at what he said.
Jean-Claude is a tough man. He's a very good man. I like him, but he's tough. He's nasty. He's the kind of guy I want negotiating for me. But he's a tough cookie. And I said to him, we have to renegotiate the deal. He said, but Mr. President, we are very happy with the deal. We don't want to negotiate. I said, you may be happy with the deal, but I'm not happy with the deal. And he didn't want to renegotiate. And after 3 times, he still didn't want to renegotiate. I said, that's okay. We don't have to renegotiate any longer. We're going to put a tariff on all of the millions of cars you send into the United States. And honestly, he was in my office so quickly from Europe that I didn't know they had airplanes that flew that fast.
It sounds like a compliment for Jean-Claude Juncker. Do you think by saying that he doesn't think the U.S. got what they wanted out of those negotiations?
I don't know that Trump knows if the US got what it wanted out of it or not. Trying to read Trump's mind and logic is not a healthy occupation. Juncker, I wouldn't say is a tough cookie, but he's smart. He has clearly found ways to find a friend with Trump. But bear in mind that Juncker won't be here next year. At the end of the year, for sure. Trump may not be here next year either if the things continue as they're going and Mueller continues as he's going. So the tariff issue as well, in terms of cars, Europe can play the long game with this, and I don't think Trump appreciates that.
Yeah, did Europe do a good job in these negotiations?
Yes, definitely, and I think the character of Jean-Claude Juncker matches the sort of ecstatic character of Trump. So in a way, they found each other. It's a good match, and I'm sure Jean-Claude Juncker loves these comments about himself coming from Trump.
Yeah, indeed. Catherine?
Well, I think he should be selling the rights to the book, the Art of the Deal 2.
Right.
I think he should call it Nasty. And
featuring Jean-Claude Juncker.
Featuring Jean-Claude Juncker.
All right, thank you guys. But we have a lot more coming up on Raw Politics for you tonight. Poland invites the US to build a military base on its soil, and you'll never guess what it could be called. And 3 months after the Aquarius rescue ship docked in Spain, we will tell you the story of one family aboard that ship. That's after a short break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, as European leaders talk Brexit tonight in Salzburg, it's important to note that this summit wasn't even supposed to focus on that issue. Originally, migration was the main item on the agenda. And if this summit resembles last June's, we could be in for some drama. Following an all-nighter back then, leaders agreed to look at new funding for tackling migrant smugglers. They talked about boosting security along the EU's external borders, as well as so-called controlled centres and disembarkation platforms. Well, joining me in the studio now for more on all of this, we have Patrice Quesada from the International Organization on Migration, Laura Ferrara, an Italian MEP from the Five Star Movement, and joining us again is EU Observer's Esther Zalan. I'd like to ask you, Laura, first. Since that June summit, do you think anything has changed?
Well, frankly speaking, I think that there are not a lot of changes at a European level. We are continuing talking about the problems about the management of migratory fluxes. We are continuing asking a European solution, but at the end we don't see that something is changed. There is a block, in particular in the European Council, where the member states seem that they are not able to find.
Do you think there is a way out of this impasse?
Well, I think that the only way is to find the European Union. I mean, it seems that now in the European Union there is a lack of union, and the way is only thinking at a European level, having a European approach, because if every single member state is focused on its territory, its problematics, its necessities, everything fails.
Okay, looking at the situation of the migration in general, is the proposal of the EU that they have put forward, those disembarkation platforms, etc., will they work?
Well, that's a good question for the European Union to try and answer. What we see with this concept that we are looking at of regional disembarkation mechanism is that we need to see the EU side and the other side of the Mediterranean working closely together. It cannot be a solution that is just on
because they're
one
talking
or the
about
other
Africa
side.
And no one yet has agreed to
come forward.
Because
I think the burden of the proof is mostly considered to be on the EU side. If the EU side, as Laura was saying, is able to show and display solidarity to come up with solutions that are workable for predictable disembarkation, for supporting life-saving actions, because right now we have a death rate in the Mediterranean that is extremely worrying. If we see that happening, if we see the European able to come forward with some solutions that can work, then there might be a way of also engaging the other side.
All right. Well, this debate over the migrant crisis, it reignited this summer with the Aquarius rescue ship. That ship was refused entry by both Italy and Malta, and it was stranded at sea for days until eventually Spain allowed it to dock. Now, 3 months later, our Euronews correspondent, Annelise Borges, has caught up with some of those who were on board. Let's take a look.
Armed with a few Spanish words they know so far, and the smiles we got to know them for, the Darabou family welcomed us to their new life. Ali, Mariam, and Mirao are slowly getting used to the idea of Spain being home now, but only because France didn't accept their asylum request.
محاولة باش نمشيو لفرنسا وقمنا بجوج جلسات مع الحكومة تاع فرنسا وكنا كنتسناو في الرد وما قبلوناش. حنا كنا طامعين وكنا باغيين نمشيو لفرنسا وفرنسا بقى تقريبا اللغة تاعهم تفهموها والمعيشة تاعهم يعني بصفة عامة عندنا واحد الفكرة على فرنسا فهمتي ومن ما قبلوناش تحطمنا نفسانيا.
Aboard Aquarius, Ali and his wife told me they were fleeing violence in Libya, but only now it's becoming clear why they couldn't go back to their native Morocco. Through Mariam's asylum interview transcript, I learned her family lived in poverty and was lured into selling Mariam to a drug trafficker. The lines describe painful memories of rape and coercion. When she finally managed to get a divorce, she fled. With Ali, she traveled to Libya to start anew. But caught in the violence, the couple sought no other option but boarding a dinghy to cross the Mediterranean Sea.
المشكل الكبير احنا اصلا علاش جينا على واد البنيه بغينا نضمنوا لها المستقبل يعني كنشوفوا في ليبيا المدارس كيستغلوهم حبس كيستغلوهم قاعده عسكريه الحمد لله غير الا قدرت نحصل على خدمه انا بالدومين ديالي انا قادر نوفر لها كاع داكشي اللي بغات وكاع داكشي اللي غتطلب في المستقبل ديالها نوفروا لها
كنتمنى نخدم نخدم نقريو بنتي احسن قرايه نشوفها شي صحفيه ودكتوره مو شي حاجه في المجتمع.
In a move that sent a strong political message of solidarity, Spain put itself forward as a port of safety to those who, like Ali and Mariam, risked everything to change the course of their destiny. The region of Valencia alone took in over 150 people from the Aquarius. Now, 3 months on, despite the costs of housing and feeding them, as well as processing their asylum papers, authorities say these arrivals do not represent a crisis.
No existe un problema migratorio en España. Lo que existe es momentos de picos, de avalanchas de ciudadanos en determinados momentos que se han desarrollado a lo largo de toda la historia.
Since Italy and Malta adopted a toughened stance on migration, Spain has witnessed a significant increase in the number of people reaching its shores. And authorities here have been saying the only solution is dealing with the situation at an European level.
Pensar que el fenómeno de la inmigración es un problema temporal o local es un terrible error. No es un problema de España, es un problema del conjunto de Europa. Europa, si quiere crecer como sociedad, tiene que hacer caso y tiene que crear una política migratoria. Los flujos migratorios, por muchas decisiones que se adopten en otros países, van a seguir existiendo. La gente busca huir de la guerra, huir de la muerte y huir del hambre.
People like Mariam, Ali and Mirao, who escaped a very difficult life and can now only hope Europe will give them a chance of a new beginning.
That was our correspondent Annelise Borges there, and we also saw Juan Carlos Fulgencio, the Spanish government's Valencia delegate. I'd like to ask you, Esther, in coverage of the migrant crisis, do you think stories like these, the human story, is missing from the discussion or the debate?
Well, ever since the peak of the migration crisis, I think they have been missing. I mean, the discussion turned very much away from people and on the border control issue and numbers. Figures, yeah. And I think it was very interesting coming from Donald Tusk, the president of the EU Council, starting the summit today. He said he told EU countries to stop the blame game and show this unity that we're talking about and really come together and try to solve the issue and not use it for political gains for their own purposes.
Yeah, in terms of those debates, I mean, if we are to look at numbers, let's check the highest, the peak of it was in 2015. We had more than 1 million migrants arrive in Europe. And then 2016, 390,000. 2017, it was 186, and 2018 to now, it's 95,000. I mean, those numbers have just gone down dramatically. Laura, is it even still a crisis? Is this still a point that politicians are probably using? But if we look at the numbers, it's down.
Yeah, it's difficult to say because now there is a period of decreasing, but maybe if the situation...
but that's a massive difference, 1 million to 95,000.
Yes, there is a big difference, but the situation in Libya or in Eritrea or in Syria still remain very difficult. There still remain a crisis. There is still a war. There are still persecutions. So if we don't have rules at the European level, we still have problems in the management, and we still fight or negotiate between member states because every day, in particular during the summer, when there is a boat with migrants that need to be put in safe, there are no member states available to receive them. I think that the only way to fix the problem is to have legal ways to reach Europe, because the biggest incoherence that we have in the European Union is that we want to fight against smugglers, against traffickants, we want to fight against the illegal migration, but the European Union doesn't give legal alternatives for people that are fleeing from wars and from persecution.
You know, for the people that voted for your party and Five Star Movement and La Liga, the thought, the idea is that they voted out of fear, or that the politicians are using fear to get those votes. Do you accept that? No, that is what Italian people, you know, the politicians there are using people's fears to get votes on this issue?
I don't think so. I think that the citizens that voted for five-star movements voted for the program, and inside our political program for the elections, it was written that we want to put legal ways to reach Europe. We want to protect the fundamental rights. I worked as a rapporteur for the asylum procedure regulation to have an equilibrium between the rights of migrants and an efficient system for the examination of the application. So I don't think that our electors have the fear and so voted.
Okay, just very quickly on your part, what about the rescue ships and rescuers? Where does that leave them? In 30 seconds, if you can tell us.
But we have a bit of a complex situation. We used to have a system of disembarkation that worked. The problem was that the burden was on frontline states. Now we have a crisis that we consider to be a political crisis that leaves ships in situation of limbo for many days with no things clear of what would happen. And the question for us is like, the next boat, what are we going to do with it?
Right.
And that's where we need a solution.
So there is still no answer to that, still in limbo.
Yep,
All right. All right, thank you very much for this discussion. And we will be back to you after a short break. Forget Trump Towers. Could Fort Trump be coming to Europe? We'll be back. Welcome back to Raw Politics. As Merkel breaks bread with European leaders tonight, her decision back home to oust Germany's top spy isn't going down smoothly. In fact, Hans-Georg Maassen joins a small club of politicians to lose their job and then end up with a promotion, making him tonight's Eurostar. It all started with a video allegedly showing right-wing protesters chasing a man through the streets of Chemnitz. In the midst of protests over the arrest of two migrant men for allegedly murdering a German man, asked about the vigilante attacks, Maassen suggested the video was not real. He was also accused of sharing confidential information with the far-right AfD. And yesterday, Merkel responded to growing pressure and fired Maassen. But no sooner had he lost his job than he was offered another, a promotion to Interior Ministry State Secretary with a pay rise. And with me to unravel Angela Merkel's woes, Donald Trump's perspective, Fort and more, is Catherine De Fiore, a journalist at EU Reporter, the EU Observer's Esther Zalan, and Euractiv journalist Brian McGuire. Okay, I'll put this to you. In doing that, Angela Merkel, what is behind what she's doing? I mean, does it show how precarious her position is that she does something like this?
I think it says a lot that the intelligence chief contradicts the boss publicly.
Yeah.
You don't do that unless you really want to risk your career. He knew what he was doing. He's also being protected. He's got a promotion. He's in a senior position in the Interior Ministry. And the person that put him there and negotiated his release is Merkel's opponent at the moment. Yeah, exactly.
It's Horst Seehofer.
Yeah, so he has put himself at the middle of this political drama, and you have to ask why. To my mind, he seems to be signaling that it's okay to question Merkel's migration policy. It's okay to move German politics towards the AfD's position. position. And I think a lot of Germans are not very comfortable with that.
So does that show that Seehofer is actually a formidable opponent for Angela Merkel? What do you think, Esther?
Exactly. And elections are coming up in Bavaria in October, where Seehofer and his party will have to defeat AfD. So he has a interest in going after the voters that have been siding with AfD rather than his party, the Christian Social Union. So I think this issue also goes to the heart of how Seehofer is trying to balance his party between the far right and Merkel, his party's traditional ally.
And what the point that you made, I'd like to ask you, Catherine, about normalizing certain opinions or putting opinions out there that normally might belong to the fringe or to the far right. And is this happening at a bigger rate in Germany?
Well, I mean, we've seen it everywhere. I mean, some parties from the right adopting some of the views, very anti-immigration and anti-migrant views. And last week in the Parliament, we saw that the vote on Article 7 of Hungary, rule of law, but it was also touched on the treatment of migrants in Hungary, that some of the CSU MEPs voted against that that motion.
Right.
So, whereas Manfred Weber, of course, the leader of the EPP and a CSU member himself, he voted against it. So we see a bit of a divide there. But while some politicians want to adopt the far right's or some of their,
Yeah. But they are using it. I mean, it's being normalized in some ways, as to Brian's point. But all right.
You're moving towards a different kind of center of politics in Germany, where the stability that Germany has become used to is corroding. And that's got to be the more worrying element for European politics in general. You lose that stable core in Germany, and you allow small fires to burn more brightly across Europe.
There's something else I'd like to talk to you all about. This is something that, in case you missed it, you've got to see this. Polish President Andrzej Duda paid a visit to the White House yesterday, and he may have made Donald Trump an offer that the U.S. president can't refuse. That's tonight's Power Play.
Uśmiechałem się do pana prezydenta, że chciałbym, udało nam się wspólnie stworzyć bazę amerykańską stałą, którą nazwiemy Fort Trump w Polsce. Wierzę w to głęboko, że jest to możliwe i jestem przekonany, że taka decyzja
Fort Trump, what do you all think of that? That is a power play. I mean, Russia must be watching this closely.
I think that was a very smart move from the side of President Duda. I mean, he's a populist himself. He understands how this works. And Trump has been reluctant to put U.S. forces or U.S. technology on the ground to protect Poland, Eastern European countries against Russia. So by naming it Fort Trump, I think that just really was an offer that Trump couldn't refuse.
And I think what's interesting is that he's looking for a U.S. base rather than going through NATO. Well, what about NATO? Does that just, back the idea that Trump has put forward that, well, NATO is not important anymore to them?
First of all, I think this is a nice piece of political deflection.
Is it?
It's he's under pressure from the European Union, particularly at the moment, to do with judicial independence, and he throws this out for everybody else to feed on for a few days as well. But then you've got the NATO element as well. Poland clearly is no friend of Russia in this, but also if you have the US on your side, it's harder for the EU to push Poland in the direction that it wants to at the moment. It has to be a lot more careful, or Trump could retaliate against the EU on behalf of Poland. That shouldn't be normal politics, but that's where we are right now.
Any guesses on what how Russia would probably react to this, Catherine?
Well, we know that they've been engaged in large manoeuvres recently, which, of course, is worrying for everybody. So one will imagine it's not welcome, and but it is a great opportunity for Trump to show a rather more aggressive stance towards Russia.
It is, when he said that Russia is aggressive in this one. All right, there's something else, another one. As always, we'd like to end today's show with the raw moment, and it's all about the British Foreign Minister, Jeremy Hunt. So earlier this year, you might remember that Mr. Hunt accidentally called his Chinese wife Japanese on a visit to Beijing. So the other way around. But as you can imagine, the internet went wild. Well, perhaps in an attempt to show that he does know the difference, he pulled out his best Japanese during talks in Tokyo yesterday. Let's take a look.
日本の皆さん、イギリスはいつもあなたの友達です。これからもよろしくお願いします。
What do you all think?
I think doctors in the UK will say he makes as much sense in Japanese as he does in English when he's speaking about the healthcare. He's in a different league. He doesn't play by the normal rules, and he probably speaks some Japanese at home, given that his wife is Japanese.
That is a political move. I mean, smart move on his part.
Yeah, I don't know where it gets him, though. It's a nice headline for today, but long-term, nowhere.
Lesser known fact.
Yeah, I know you knew something about this.
Yes, he did try to start a business exporting marmalade to Japan. So maybe this is where all his knowledge of
maybe he's looking for a post-Brexit career.
Exactly, I was just thinking, is this going to be a Japan-UK trade
Yeah, maybe
deal?
this is the opening for the talks, or just making up to his wife.
Oh, yeah.
Jam.
Jeremy Hunt is the UK's Paddington Bear of export, it seems. Hunt doesn't have a career after this if Brexit goes badly. I don't see what he can do. And today's just it's a nice element of his personality, but nothing else.
Nothing more. All right. Well, thank you for being here, for all your insights and fun views, and we'd like to hear from you. Thank you for joining us. You could reach me at Twitter at Tesa Arcilla, or you can follow us at Euronews and use the hashtag Raw Politics. Have a good evening and bye for now.